For any justice-impacted person, one of the great difficulties is figuring out how am I going to recalibrate my life and get back on track and start moving forward in a manner that will allow me to feel as if I'm living with my dignity intact, as if I'm not running from other people and nobody's running from me, but rather I'm moving forward and living a life of meaning and relevance and dignity. That is the goal for anybody who wants to pursue a path of success. And it's something I had to learn while going through 26 years in federal prison, because I didn't know how to do that as a young man, right? I was 20 years old when I started breaking the law. And as a result of breaking the law, authorities investigated me. I went through a trial and I made a series of really bad decisions. And it wasn't until somebody helped me start to think about the result. What do you want on the other side of this journey? And that's one lesson I would like to give to any justice-impacted person, regardless of what stage of the journey they're in. If they haven't been charged, but they know a government investigation is coming, if they are in the system and they are contemplating, oh, do I plead guilty? Do I not plead guilty? If they're getting ready for a pre-sentence investigation, if they are getting ready for a sentencing hearing, if they're getting ready to surrender to prison, or they're in prison, we should always be thinking about the result. What is the best possible outcome? And a mitigation strategy is very much a plan. It's engineering a release plan. And that release plan is going to have different tactics at different stages of the journey. But everything should relate to the result. What is it that you want? It's never too early. It's never too late to start sowing these seeds. But if you don't know how to do it, or if you're not getting guidance from somebody who can really help you architect this strategy, you're not as strong as you could be. And I want you to be strong. That's what everything at our Prison Professors suite of companies is all about, helping you learn how to help yourself. And I never ask anybody to do anything that I didn't personally go through, that I didn't personally do. And that's why today's journal entry on Prison Professors and Prison Professors Talent, today's journal entry is really about architecting a timeline. So you'll see I'm making this journal entry on July 26th because I'm coming close to a pivotal time. I'm coming close to this time when I'm about to celebrate 10 years of being free from the Bureau of Prisons after 9,500 days inside. But any success that I have built resulted from figuring out how to start focusing on results and not focus on the current situation. Until you learn how to do that, you're in a world of challenges. So in this simple timeline, I'm going to walk you through it. I want you to be thinking about the timeline that you're going to live. In my case, I was 23 years old in 1987. That's when authorities arrested me and brought me into custody. And it was the start of my life as federal prisoner number 16377-004. Now, at that time, I didn't understand the system at all. I allowed my defense attorney to advise me on every stage in the journey, and because of that, I just made a series of really bad decisions. I didn't really have a strategy because others were leading me rather than me leading myself, and didn't understand how the judicial system or the prison system worked. And if you don't understand those concepts, well, you really can't be the CEO of your life because you're not engineering a pathway to success. And you've got to start engineering your pathway to success. And the earlier you start, the better off you're going to be. I didn't get that in 1987. And so I spent that first year making a series of bad decisions. So I would argue that you've got to figure out, when are you going to start making good decisions? I didn't know how to make those good decisions right after my arrest. I was really just wanting to believe everything my lawyer was telling me, even though I knew in my heart that I was guilty. And that's when it takes me into 1988. So if you move down my little journal for today, I'm talking about, despite knowing my guilt, I proceeded through a lengthy trial. I committed perjury on the witness stand, declaring myself innocent, and really making accusations against the government. But the jury saw through all that. They convicted me on every count. And as a result of that, I exposed myself to a bigger problem than I otherwise could have had. But that's when I had this like transformation in my life, because I go back to the segregated housing unit where I was being held in isolation of a detention center. And while I'm in that detention center, an officer starts passing me a series of books, trying to like pick up my spirits, because I'm super young. I'm 23 years old or so at that time. And he's passing me these books, showing me this story of people who have gone through a crisis and came back stronger. And that's what really changed everything in my life, because I started to learn about people like Frederick Douglass and Socrates and Nelson Mandela and Viktor Frankl. And I started to get inspired, by other stories of like from the Bible, because you're in the hole, you're trying to find a way to build hope, because that's what we need to be resilient. We need hope. And that hope came to me sometimes by reading either the story of the prodigal son or the parable of the talents in the Bible. Those stories helped me realize, okay, I'm here, but I got to find a way to pick myself up. And that's what the people in our courses, that's what we strive to help them understand. How do you pick yourself up? How do you grow strong? How do you see the end game? And by looking at things that way and reading about people, I started to learn how to think differently. And that's what, I was going through that transition when a judge imposed a 45-year sentence on me. And so now we get into this year 1988 to 1995, and this is carrying me through the time, up until the time I'm almost like in my early, I think I was in like my late 20s or early 30s, 31 years old when I get out of the penitentiary, but I transitioned into a high security penitentiary. But fortunately, reading about leaders who'd overcome, they helped me start to think differently. Instead of focusing on the bad things and where I am and all the pressure of being in confinement, I start thinking about, people that I want to connect with in society. I called them my avatars. Who are they? What am I going to do? In what ways can I position myself to lead a life of meaning and relevance and dignity when I get out of here? And that caused me to start thinking about the people I wanted to meet. And that's what I would recommend to you. Think about the people you want to meet in your future and figure out what will they expect from you. That's how you start architecting an effective release plan. You figure out how will these people in the future are going to think about you. And as I show you on my little timeline here, for me, that said, okay, I got to accept I'm going to be in here for 10 years. That's just a fact. But during those 10 years, I'm going to focus on educating myself, contributing to society, and building a support network. And that's what I would encourage you to think about. Don't think about what you can do. Don't think about what the system is taking away from you. Focus on what can you do, because I'm in a different stage of the mitigation journey right now. Now I'm convicted. Now I'm sentenced. Now the ship has sailed without me trying to, speak about anything in the judicial system. I've got to start focusing on how am I going to get out of here? And that's what I would encourage people in prison to be doing, or people that at a different stage. Figure out the right plan for the right time. For me, it was focusing on educating myself, contributing to society, and building a support network. So I start writing to universities, and all that leads to new opportunities. So by the time I'm 31, when I transition out of a pen, I've already got a bachelor's degree. I'm well on my way to a master's degree. I'm publishing about why we could use incentives and to pursue excellence, and how that would be a far better criminal justice system. And so that work really continues as I go through this journey. New stages of the timeline, right? 1995 to 1997, now I'm getting into my early 30s. I'm transitioning from a high security penitentiary to a medium security prison. I'm earning my master's degree from Hofstra University. I'm publishing more and beginning studies at the University of Connecticut toward my PhD. So life is about a series of incremental steps. How am I going to rebuild? How am I going to recalibrate? And that's what we want people thinking about as they start architecting their own release plan, their own mitigation strategy. Taking me now to the time I'm 39, from 1998 to 2003. where I transitioned to a low security prison. But it's because of those early decisions in the journey that I start to really manifest more success in the process. I start building my support network. I earn my first $1 million while I'm in prison. I start building a support system by publishing on the internet, because that's what's changing in the world, right? This is 1998 to 2003. The world's changing. Internet's becoming important. I begin publishing more. I publish about prison and profiles from prison, always striving to do, this is all part of my plan to build a career in advocacy, to follow the model that I learned from Frederick Douglass, to show people what can we do better. So instead of crying and complaining about what happened to me, which doesn't really move the needle in getting to the success we want, I start thinking about how am I going to change it for everybody in the system. So we want to influence millions of people. And if we can do that, that's when opportunities start to open. And so I published about prison and profiles from prison and books that were being used in universities. And through that, I'm building my credibility. I'm executing on that plan. I said I would focus on education. Well, now I got a bachelor's degree and a master's degree. I said I would contribute to society. Now I'm publishing books that are used in universities. I said I would build a support network. Well, now, tens of thousands of people are becoming aware of me. Even though I'm in prison, it actually leads to me finding the love of my life and getting married in prison to Carol inside of a federal prison's visiting room. And eventually, my credibility is building, and administrators transition me out from a federal, I guess I'm in a low security prison, to a minimum security camp. And that's when new opportunities start to open, because now things are different, right? I sowed seeds early to start building that path. That's what you've got to do. It doesn't matter what stage in the journey you're in. You might be right now getting ready for sentencing. You might be getting ready to plead guilty. You might already be in prison for 5 years or 10 years or 20 years. It doesn't matter. What does matter is you are sowing seeds for a pathway to success, and you've got to find a way to feed that energy every day, even if you're locked inside of a prison. You got to have that hope that Nelson Mandela gave me, or Frederick Douglass gave me, or Viktor Frankl gave me. You've got to learn how to muster it yourself, just like I did. I learned from people who'd gone through crisis, didn't talk about preparing for success, but did it. So that leads to publishing opportunities more, because now I'm a published author with academic books. I reach out to St. Martin's Press, first a literary agent, and then get a deal with St. Martin's Press and publish this book, Inside Life Behind Bars in America. I begin developing programs that would allow me to communicate at scale, meaning you have books like this that I don't have to be in the classroom to share these ideas that I learned from leaders, right? There are books like this that people can learn to change their own life. And so I start writing these kinds of things while I'm incarcerated, always with the idea of saying, I am going to use these tools as part of an advocacy effort. So everything is part of a cohesive, coordinated release plan. And so in 2004, 2005, while I'm at the Florence camp, I publish this book, or St. Martin's Press publishes this book. It gets widely distributed. And that leads, of course, to me getting transferred from the Florence camp to another camp. I go to Lompoc camp, continue writing, launch a publishing business, and start bringing more books to market, start using the internet more effectively, even though I'm in prison and I've never seen the internet. In fact, when I was in prison, I used to read about the internet so much and try to understand it that, I would dream about it. Well, what is it? How does it work? How do you get on the internet? Because, it's like reading a book about learning to play tennis. You can read a book about learning to play tennis. That doesn't make you a great tennis player. So I'm reading about the internet, trying to figure out, and even though I can't access it, I'm advancing my knowledge of how it works. And that's what made a big difference in my success upon release, was figuring these things out long before I got out. But I wanted to teach other people how to do it as well. So So I continue to write. I continue to publish on the need for reform. Then I transition out to Taft Camp, which is another federal prison camp. I continue my work of ghostwriting books for other people, building websites, developing relationships with some of the best universities in the world, including Stanford. And it's really where I started my real career prep by meeting my partner Justin Paperny in prison, and we started to collaborate to build something more, something that could help more people understand how you could sow seeds today for a better outcome tomorrow. So all of this is part of a coherent strategy, a solid release plan. That release plan has to iterate. It has to evolve. So I'm just showing you, this is how I did it. 2012, I transferred to Atwater Camp, preparing for release. I'm running a lot of marathons in prison and getting ready because in 2013, I transitioned out of prison for the first time, and my wife drives me to the halfway house in San Francisco. I start building my career with real estate investments. I purchased my first real estate while I was still in the first week of the halfway house. I start building my career. Really, I shouldn't say I start building my career, because I started to build my career at the start of my prison sentence. And it was because of all these incremental steps that I take to execute on the release plan that San Francisco University reaches out and says, hey, we'd love for you to be a professor here. And I start teaching, and it advances my reforms so that I am now reaching out to other law schools and universities and speaking and publishing more and trying to help more people understand how we can manage prisons better through incentivizing excellence, defining what excellence is, and then pushing along that line to encourage more people. And that leads to a speaking career, teaching for the university, publishing at UC Hastings Law School. That's when we start building other technology. And that's really when I finish my prison journey and then start expanding my career. So these latter sections are kind of taking us through 2015, where my work in reform is continuing with the Rabina Institute at the University of Minnesota Law School, building more rental properties. And then a big opportunity comes when I get to speak at a judicial conference, and there's like 1,000 people in the room, and they're all federal judges and leaders of prison systems, and that's what led to opportunities for me to come speaking and bring programs into California Department of Corrections, Washington State Department of Corrections, Bureau of Prisons, and Department of Justice, traveling all over from as far away as Maine to state of Maine to Guam and Saipan in Micronesia at the invitation of the Department of Justice. So all of these projects are really part of a disciplined, deliberate strategy to prepare for success. It leads to me launching other businesses, including timeshare compliance, which is now doing like north of $30 million a year in revenues. Pacific Healthcare, which I launched with Carol. We later sold that business. I'm 17. I'm continuing my real estate ventures, continuing expansion with the Bureau of Prisons, and publishing and speaking on the need to change the system. And that, of course, leads to the first step back in 2018. Again, I'm continuing to work, but it also leads to this really lost era of my life where I make this investment to develop land in Costa Rica. But the Federal Trade Commission went after the guy I invested with as the guy I met in prison, ironically. And although I have nothing bad to say about the guy, he never deceived me. I put up $1.4 million in the asset, in the investment, and this is when the collateral consequences of being formerly incarcerated comes up, because then they start targeting me. How does this guy come out of prison and he's become wealthy, and they attack me. So long story short, it just leads to a year of litigation and me walking away from more than $3 million in assets rather than fighting the government again. And I just said, okay, I've made it before, I'll make it again, and I'm going to transition. And that's exactly what I did. Rebuild. And I rebuilt by doing digital products and expand my relationships with prison systems and jail systems across the country. and growing our digital product system, but at the same time, working to expand our advocacy to try and create mechanisms that more people can use to emerge successfully. And so that was the goal for me from the very beginning. This little timeline that I just created kind of shows people how I did it. How are you going to do it? How are you going to focus on results? The more you focus on results, the more effectively you can architect a plan that will help you get there. And you have to know, when you are a justice impacted person, obstacles will always come. There will always be people throwing rocks at you. There will always be people looking at you as an easy target. And so you have to figure out, okay, how am I going to overcome that? I can only show you what worked for me. What worked for me is transparency and honesty. And always say, I will never ask anybody to do anything that I didn't do and that I'm not still doing today. That's what I want for you. Figure out a plan so that you can self-advocate your way to the best possible outcome. And regardless of what stage you're in, you can start sowing these seeds. And if you're in federal prison or state prison and you're working through these courses, I want you to begin thinking about, okay, I've got to start building my timeline today for the life I want to live in 10 years or in 15 years. And that's what I wanted to share on today's Daily Journal. I would encourage you to continue reading through our courses at Preparing for Success After Prison, which is available on Prison Professors and probably available in your institution. But have your family look at prisonprofessorstalent.com, and they can look at examples of what does excellence look like in building a release plan, and how does your release plan advance you along the way. I mean, just think about this. If I were to start off, I told you that I got inspired by Nelson Mandela and Viktor Frankl and, all of these leaders. What would have happened if in 1988 I would have reached out to Mandela, who was getting out of prison around the same time I was coming in, and say, hey, I read about your story and I want you to help me get me out, right? That wouldn't have worked, okay? I had to work on my own. And you have to work on your own. I can show you the path. I can provide you the mechanisms that you could use to pull the levers in your own life, but you've got to learn. No, your lawyer can't do this for you. Once you go into the system, life is about self-advocacy, and I want you to become your best self-advocate. My name is Michael Santos. I'm the founder of Prison Professors, and I believe in you. Thanks.